Our story begins before even the first session, because this is not some amateur hour game. This is full-on cringe, try-hard fest, where being a no-lifer is just not good enough. You must tap into your deep hidden power, the weaponized autism. As a result, the first intrigues actually begin the moment the final faction picks are announced by the hosts. Every player had started scheming in their own special ways. Since it may not be relevant, most people would scheme with their closest neighbors, which brings our focus to Throt, Astragoth, and Archon trio. Archon quickly proposes the secret border deal with Throt, agreeing to give all the minor settlements to Throt and taking all the dark fortresses in a complete mess of borders in exchange for a secret alliance. Throt, while at first agrees to this deal, after a first few turns goes radio silent regarding borders 5 turns or so in. This could be a big problem for all involved, and may spark a war in the first 15 turns of the long war, exactly the scenario the hosts wanted to avoid. However, another deal was made between Archon and Astragoth. You see, a certain overgrown lizard is of interest to both parties in this little plot. To Astragoth as a threat and also a very lucrative sacking target. To Archon as a very annoying early Confederation target. Both Astragoth and Archon were aware of each other's plans, and they were not really in conflict unless one side wanted to screw over the other one by eliminating Kolek and taking that settlement. After a few public banters of friction, the under first 15 turn race to Kolek was on for both Astragoth and Archon. This was going to be tough for Archon because Archon himself is best sent to Northwest in order to take out Boris without fighting, thanks to his vassalization mechanic, meaning he had to send a second army to the south, and Chaos Economy is really not made for that kind of early push. As such, Archon would need to plan very carefully not to go bankrupt, but also make it to Kolek in time to take him before Astragoth could finish him off. Doing some rudimentary math, it was estimated that if Archon skips Plains of Zambaijin, then they can make it on the same turn to Challenge Stone as Astragoth, the starting province of Kolek. Astragoth has the advantage here since he will be bringing his main army, and in the game this early, it was very much anyone's game as to who would win in a direct engagement. As usual though, nothing would go according to plan. Archon, being strapped for cash, made his second army using the funds from his first quest. He recruited the second army, sent it south directly to Kolek, hoping that Astragoth would take care of Kolek's main army, and second army could vassalize and take Challenge Stone under Astragoth's nose. And at first, it seemed like Archon's second army made it there on time, with Astragoth just in the corner of visibility with Kolek's army right outside of Challenge Stone. All 3 armies were stuck in a Mexican standoff for 2 turns, while Astragoth brought in a second lord to bait Kolek into an ambush for a win with limited losses. Archon's second army, however, was alone in an ambush just outside Challenge Stone, since Archon can recruit units on the same turn. As long as that army was in ambush, Astragoth had no idea what units that second army held, and just a general idea as to where it would be. So as the second army recruited random amalgamation of trolls, marauders, and a couple of decent units. This put strain on Archon's budget, and just the turn after Kolek fell to Astragoth's bait, Astragoth sacked Challenge Stone, and just at that moment, Chaos Army sprung from its ambush position and initiated combat on Astragoth, who had already used half their movement and auto-resolved into a close defeat, with Chaos just open to take the sacked level 1 Challenge Stone, resulting in them getting Kolek but much less loot compared to the standard at a much higher cost. However, Archon still paraded Astragoth's defeat trait on his second army like a triumph to the rest of the world. At least, that is the story that the rest of the world has heard.
Do you know who I am?
No.
This was, of course, the cover story that was told to the world, so that the rest of the world's major powers do not suspect a powerful alliance that would cause a coalition against. The truth of the matter is, Archon and Astragoth were friendly and came to an agreement from the very beginning that Astragoth would sack the Challenge Stone and Archon would confederate Kolak, and in return they would have mutual friendship that became very important in the years to come. You see, it was no coincidence that Archaon's second army showed up when Astragoth did. The players for both of these factions had already experimented exactly what moves they would need to make to reach Challenge Stone without slowing down their tempos. They agreed on a cover story to cover their secret alliance, which was that Archaon stole Challenge Stone while Astragoth was fighting Kolak. What they did not plan for, though, was Kolak spent his entire time sitting in his base and recruiting units, swelling up to numbers that were, even if Astragoth were to ambush Kolak, they would still most likely lose. So, they shifted their plan. They waited an extra turn, Archaon's second army recruited all the nearby units, and both ambushed Kolak together with Astragoth's Bait Lord. The plan worked, somewhat. The ambush worked, but they both took massive losses and barely escaped getting wiped out, and certainly wiping out their war funding. And for some unknown reason, despite being on the same side of the battle, Archaon's Lord got Astragoth's defeat trait instead of Kolak's, while Astragoth was still alive. Which was funny at first, but Hoods and Ark immediately came up with the idea to amend their story to say that they have been fighting a border war this whole time. After one more turn spent in recovery, they barely had enough forces to sack Challenge Stone, which was not even close to the price of the units that they lost. So Astragoth lost about 4 or 5 turns of tempo, and Archaon lost about 8 to 10k gold, but gained Kolak and still has to send an army to take Plains of Zanbaijin, which they skipped to get to Kolak on time. So this tier 1 Dark Fortress was not a good consolation prize at all.
A few moments later.
In the rest of the world, Throt explosively captures over a dozen settlements in the first session, just quietly, and his tempo is only going up, with him being in the most settlement-dense region now. Eltharion was constrained by the dual start rule, but still made some headway in Ulthuan, and thus controlling about 30% of the island. Vampire counts had a nice little expansion in their Rabbi and in the jungles. Admirable. Ostankia, as expected, had a few issues here and there, and had to take a few manual battles to prevent huge losses. Fortunately, Ostankia's projectiles and hardy Kislev infantry won the day. Alberich encountered a few problems with AI acting differently than expected, and causing a few issues with his expansion, but being Bretonnia, his biggest strength and tempo were still ahead of him. Lorkir, around 3 hours into the 4-hour session, says something that makes everyone freeze. Hey guys, where are the sea lanes? They're not where they should be. We then checked the Norska sea lane as well, and that is when we realized Hoods done a big oopsie whoopsie and turned off sea lanes in addition to custom characters. This is a problem, a big one. An argument ensued around restarting, and eventually a vote was held. An idea to restart was shut down. During this time, Lorkir realized while he could teleport himself to Nagaroth through his quest, he would not be able to reinforce using sea lanes. Still, a pretty average growth performance for Lorkir, who sadly could not continue the campaign. This would normally be received with a lot of criticism and even a soft timeout from joining other long wars, but considering that he just came to watch the game at the start of the session and was roped into joining as our 8th player, it was agreed it was all good and he was a very good sport about it. He continues to host games on other Discord servers to this day. So a quick shout out to Pigeon, who agreed to take over Lorkir for a session. At the end of session 1, it was clear that Throt was on his way to world domination with his explosive tempo that was great even for Skaven, who have a very strong early game. The rest of the world looked in jealousy and started making plans, most of which was chaos, since it would seem that the previously agreed border deal has fell through. With Throt capturing Dark Fortress settlements, a war was now inevitable. And both factions knew this war could mean one of the factions would get significantly weakened if any one of them scored a decisive victory and managed to penetrate into the other's heartland. Now join us next time to witness the procession of our early game war and lots of world-spanning plots that will shape the future of the campaign in Sun Tzu League's Season 2 Long War.